Imagine spending 2 years of your life on a project, pouring your heart and soul into it, spending money on music, art, and all sorts of other important things, and then just tossing everything out the window. Yeah, that's basically what I just did. Hi, this is MHJMakes, and today I'm going to explain how I decided to completely reboot my life's work. Fun. So, for those of you who aren't aware, I'm working on an online screenplay series titled The Nobunaga Universe. You can find it on my wonderfully designed website, linked in the description. It's a superhero story that takes place in an alternate history, diesel punk, 1950s post-war Japan. Try saying that 5 times fast. So basically imagine if Fallout, Disco Elysium, and Watchmen had a baby that was maybe kind of slightly as good as them, and that's basically what you got here. So for a bit of background. I first came up with the concept in the summer of 2018 when I took a screenwriting course at my old university. It started out as a small concept, but I just knew that I had to do something more with this story. It just couldn't exist in my mind. In fact, I believe that it would have been a crime to have kept it confined in there. So after the class ended, I spent some time doing some world building, which in my opinion is actually one of the most fun parts of coming up with a new story. Figuring out all the different factions, technology, etc. Just ways to make it feel like a real breathing world is what I love to do. And a couple years later, I decided that I wanted to go forward with my idea. But there was one problem. I had originally envisioned this title being a graphic novel, something that I would write and draw myself. I envisioned it this way because I wanted as much creative control over my project as possible with as little interference from outsiders. And I viewed this path as the most likely way to achieve that goal. So, in other words, I had trust issues. But, as you can tell by these wonderfully drawn stick figures, my writing skills are just maybe a tad bit above my drawing skills. Just a tad bit. I figured that I'd need at least 5 or 6 years of training and drawing before I'd even be able to start working my project. And even then, it would probably take a good 2 or 3 years to write and finalize it, and that doesn't even address the additional time that it would take to publish it and stuff. I figured that if I waited all that time before I really got working on it, I'd never really get a chance to grow and develop the world, and my writing skills, to be able to write the best work that I could. I'd be too focused on drawing, I'd be too focused on planning, which are great and all, but that doesn't lead to having a real actual project in the world that we actually live in, you know? So, to circumvent this, I came up with a plan. I decided that I was going to start writing a series of side stories set in-universe that would give me a chance to expand the lore and practice writing in preparation for the big graphic novel. This is what led to Peachy Keen. It was a side story that was going to be told from the perspective of 3 Peach Boys. The Peach Boys, by the way, are a greaser king of my story. As they do a mission, you learn to love and maybe even sympathize for them. And then they get beaten up by our heroes in the end because... sad, I guess? I don't know, it sounded a lot more profound in my head, to be honest. Anyway, as I was writing this story, I found that I really like these characters. Like, I really like them. I just couldn't help but think it'd be a waste to get rid of them. So, I thought, what if, instead of this being a side story, I just made this the first chapter of my main story? That way, I can keep the characters and go full throttle on my project, since by this point, I had kinda given up on drawing. This would be the perfect plan, right? 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 Well, obviously not. See, here's the thing. Let's take a look at the series Stranger Things. I think everyone at this point knows that the series was originally meant to be an anthology. Originally, we'd only follow the Hawkins crew for 1 season before going to a different location with a different set of characters and a different conflict. And one complaint that critics of the series have is that you can really tell that the story and lore was only meant for that original first season. Everything afterwards, to a certain extent, felt like the writers were just stretching out an idea that wasn't meant to be stretched. They were spending so much time trying to figure out what they should do because everything ended so perfectly at the end of the first season. This resulted in characters that really shined in the first season, but then afterwards they started to feel kind of flat. And then you kind of had plot points that came across as a bit half-baked and, well, you know. Disclaimer, I like Stranger Things, and I don't intend to turn this into a Stranger Things analysis. But what I will say is that I do understand where critics are coming from, And more or less, I went through the same thing myself when I was writing what I now dub the Beta Universe. Trademark. So, in the first chapter, I started out with this ragtag group of teens who had a funny dynamic and showed an interesting perspective that would have otherwise been missed from the universe. But the premise behind their introduction was only meant to be a side story, so after I got through their initial premise, I was kinda stuck. What the heck was I even supposed to do with these characters? Meanwhile, they're competing for screen time with other characters who are supposed to be part of the main story from the beginning. And now I'm trying to figure out how to keep the teen story engaging while keeping the main stories engaging, and all the while trying to keep them relevant to each other to some extent. Which proved to be impossible. I suppose it didn't help that I didn't outline any of this beforehand. In fact, I didn't even start outlining stories until chapter 5. Because for the longest time, even in university, whether I was writing a screenplay, whether I was writing a paper, whatever, I just didn't need to. But as I was writing this, I realized just how messy things were getting, and I wanted to try to clean things up as much as possible before the story completely fell apart a few chapters later. But doing so proved to be the writing equivalent of trying to fix a leaky pipe with a band-aid. It might help a little, but sooner or later you're going to need to hire a plumber. And I haven't even addressed how my failure to outline meant that I wasn't even fully aware of my main character's conflicts or motivations, which of course led to even more mess, and well, the end result was the Beta Universe. Now don't get me wrong, it was fun to write, very fun in fact, but I was feeling so dissatisfied with it. I felt like I was writing beneath my talents, and I thought that both myself and the series deserved so much more than what it was getting. Eventually, I ran across a video that talked about the manga author Araki Hirohiko, better known as the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The video specifically talked about his thought process behind setting parts 7 and 8 in a separate universe from the first 6 parts. Now, I won't go too into detail about the video itself, but it was very eye-opening. Spending 20 years on a project is no joke. In comparison, my 2 years was basically nothing at all. Sunk cost fallacy be darned, it would make so much more sense for me to start from the beginning, with a clean slate, and write something that I was proud of. If he could do it, I could do it too. In the long run, this would be for the best, I thought. Because, with the passage of time, I'd be able to catch up to where I used to be. And then, go even further beyond. And it's not like the time that I spent in the Beta Universe was time wasted either. I got a chance to learn what it takes to write a more long-form narrative, get a better idea of who my characters really were, and learn what does and doesn't work in my story. And you can't put a price on that. There were a few other things that I wanted to do with this new universe. Around the time that I started drafting my new universe, I was watching a lot of Fallout lore videos. Like, a stupid amount. And it made me realize something. For as much as I call my series a dieselpunk one, it did not feel like it at all. So, I made a bit more effort this time around to add some more retrofuturistic technology. I also wanted to try to better capture Japan's population density. Seriously, if you've ever been to Japan, you wouldn't know that virtually no space goes unused. Empty alleyways like you would see in New York City, or rather, Hollywood's version of New York City, because you'd be surprised to find out that the real New York doesn't really have those either. But you know what does? Los Angeles, where all those things are actually being filmed. But anyway, tangent aside, I wanted the city to feel dense and alive, and I really strived to make it feel that way this time around. Additionally, I wanted to make better use of certain characters. Because I was basically making things up as I went along for the first few chapters of the Beta Universe, I had a lot of really cool characters that kind of just spawned in at random into the story, because the specific scene that introduced them demanded it. This includes characters like Detectives Morikawa and Ando, Sachiko, Tomoko, Saburo, and Karen. And now that I've worked with these characters for a bit, I was able to introduce them into the story in a way that would make better use of them. They felt a lot more organic this way. I also wanted to adjust the fight scenes a bit. One of my test readers gave me some very funny advice. They said, "Your fights play out very similarly. All they do is punch, kick, grapple, and clinch." I thought this was funny because, congratulations, you just described fighting. That is literally all you do in fighting. But it did open my eyes a bit. I tried, and still very much try, to create realistic fights. I wanted my characters to use real-world techniques that had real-world consequences. If someone hits you in the head with a steel pipe, that's not something that you can just shrug off. If someone catches you with a clean shot to the face, unless you're Triple G or something, you're probably going to sleep. But that doesn't mean that I can't add a bit of flair to it. Because, well, the average viewer doesn't understand the beauty that exists in real trained fighting. And that's okay. it's not your job to automatically have that appreciation. It's my job as a writer to showcase that and hopefully help you develop that appreciation. So that's something I'll definitely be working on. Now, I've reorganized my story, outlined what I was going to do, and I took everything that I learned from the beta universe. Then, I wrote the first chapter of the new and improved Omega universe. And the end result? It's okay. Like, it's not bad or anything, but it's nothing that'll blow your socks off. And that's okay, because how often do first episodes completely blow your mind anyway? Admittedly, I can think of some really good first episodes of shows. The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and Vinland Saga come to mind. But even then, compared to what came later, the first episodes pale in comparison. But it's not the first episode's job to completely change your world. It's to introduce the show's world and characters to you, to teach you how the universe works, its rules and regulations, in preparation for what's to come. And from that perspective, I think that it did its job. I'm very excited to see what's next, and hopefully, maybe, some of you guys will be too. Until then, I think I'm done talking your ear off. Read it for yourself if you want, or don't. That's okay too. Either way, I hope that you get an idea of my creative process, and hopefully for any fellow creatives out there, you're able to find something to relate to. See you later!